"This is all very important," Holmes said. "It answers questions I have been unable to answer. Did you know that Mrs. Lyons and Stapleton are very close friends? They often meet, and they write to each other. Perhaps I can use this information to turn Stapleton's wife against him." "His wife?" I asked. "Who and where is she?" "The lady called Miss Stapleton, who pretends to be his sister, is really his wife," said Holmes. "Good heavens, Holmes, are you sure? If she is his wife, why did Stapleton allow Sir Henry to fall in love with her?" "Sir Henry hurt nobody except himself when he fell in love with her. Stapleton took care that Sir Henry did not make love to her. I repeat that the lady is his wife, and not his sister. They came here only 2 years ago, and before that he owned a school in the north of England. He told you that, and you told me in your letter. I checked on the school, and found that the man who had owned it went away with his wife when the school closed. They changed their name, but the couple who were described to me were without doubt the Stapletons." "But why do they pretend to be brother and sister?" I asked. "Because Stapleton thought that she would be very much more useful to him if she appeared to be a free woman." Suddenly I saw behind Stapleton's smiling face a heart with murder in it. "So he is our enemy. He is the man who followed us in London. And the warning note to Sir Henry came from Miss Stapleton." "Exactly," said Holmes. "But if Miss Stapleton is really his wife, why is he a close friend of Mrs. Laura Lyons?" "Your excellent work has given us the answer to that question, Watson. When you told me that Mrs. Lyons was getting a divorce, I realized that she hoped to marry Stapleton. He told her that he was unmarried, and that he wanted to make her his wife. When she learns the truth, she may decide to help us. We must go and see her tomorrow." "One last question, Holmes," I said. "What is Stapleton trying to do?" Holmes dropped his voice as he answered. "Murder. Cold-blooded murder. That is what Stapleton is trying to do. Do not ask me for details. I am about to catch him in a trap. There is only one danger, that he will act before I am ready. Another day, or perhaps 2, and I shall complete my case. Until then, you must guard Sir Henry very closely. You should be with him today. However, what you have discovered is very valuable." As he finished speaking, an awful scream, a long cry of pain and horror, broke the silence of the moor. The sound turned my blood to ice. "Oh, my God!" I whispered. "What is that?" Holmes had jumped to his feet. "Where is it, Watson?" he whispered, and I could see that he was shaken by the scream. The hopeless cry came again, louder, nearer, and more terrible than before. With it came a new sound, deep and frightening. "The hound!" cried Holmes. "Come, Watson, come! Great heavens! If we are too late—" Chapter 14. Death on the Moor. Holmes started running over the moor, and I followed him. From somewhere in front of us came one more hopeless scream. It was followed by the sound of something falling heavily. We stopped and listened. I saw Holmes put his hand to his head. "He has won, Watson. We're too late. I was mad not to act sooner. And you, Watson, look what happens when you leave the man I asked you to guard. But if the worst has happened, we shall see that Stapleton doesn't go free." We ran through the dark towards the place where the cries had come from. We reached a rocky edge from which a steep side fell away. Below us we saw the body of a man. He was lying with his face down on the ground. He had fallen on his head, which was bent under him, and his neck was broken. Holmes lit a match. We saw with horror the blood running out onto the ground from his head. We both remembered clearly the suit the man was wearing. It was a thick red-brown country suit. It was the suit Sir Henry had been wearing on the morning when we first met him in Baker Street. We saw it for a moment, and then the match went out. Our hearts turned sick and cold inside us. "The devil! The murderer! I shall never forgive myself for leaving Sir Henry alone," I whispered angrily. "It's more my fault than yours," said Holmes. "I have let this good man die because I was busy with the last details of my case. It is the greatest mistake I have ever made. But why did he come out onto the moor? I told him it would lead to his death. Now both Sir Henry and his uncle have been murdered. By heavens, clever as he is, I shall trap Stapleton before another day is past." With heavy hearts we stood on either side of the broken body. Then Holmes bent over the body and began to move it. All of a sudden he began to laugh and jump up and down. "Look at the face!" he shouted, hitting me on the back. "It is not Sir Henry. It's Selden, the escaped prisoner." We turned the body over. There was no doubt about it. I had seen the face before, on the night Sir Henry and I had chased Selden over the moor. Then I suddenly remembered, and everything became clear. Sir Henry had told me how he gave his old clothes to Barrymore. I realized that this suit had been among the clothes Barrymore had left for Selden, and I told Holmes. "Then the clothes have caused the death of the poor man. The hound had been given something of Sir Henry's to smell, so that it would pick up his scent and follow him. I think that is why the shoe was taken from the hotel in London. So the hound followed the scent and hunted this man. But there is one thing I don't understand. How did Selden know that the hound was following him? We know he ran a long way. He was screaming for a long time before he fell, and we could hear that he was running as he screamed. So the hound was a long way behind him when he began to run. How could he see it in the dark? How did he know it was there until it was close behind him?" "I cannot answer that," I said. "But there is something else I don't understand. Why was the hound out on the moor tonight? Stapleton would not let it go out unless he thought Sir Henry was there." "We may know the answer to that question very soon," said Holmes. "Here comes Stapleton." His sharp eyes had seen a figure moving in the darkness in front of us, and as the man came closer, I could see that it was indeed Stapleton. "We must be very careful not to show that we suspect him," Holmes warned me. Stapleton stopped when he saw us, and then walked forward again. "Dr. Watson, is that you? I didn't expect to see you on the moor at this time of night. But, dear me, what's this? Somebody hurt? Not... Don't tell me that it's our friend Sir Henry." He went past me and bent over the dead man. I heard him breathe in quickly. Who is this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "It's Selden, the escaped prisoner." Stapleton quickly managed to hide the look of surprise and disappointment on his face as he turned towards us. He looked sharply from Holmes to me. "Dear me, how terrible! How did he die?" "We think he broke his neck by falling over the edge of these rocks," I said. "I heard a cry, and that is why I came out. I was worried about Sir Henry," Stapleton said. "Why were you worried about Sir Henry?" I asked. "Because I had invited him to my house. When he did not come, I was surprised. Then, when I heard cries on the moor, I began to worry about him. I wonder—" His eyes went quickly from my face to Holmes's. "Did you hear anything else at all?" "No," said Holmes. "Did you?" "No," said Stapleton. "What do you mean, then?" "Oh, you know, the stories about the supernatural hound. I wondered if it had been here tonight." "We heard nothing of that kind," I said. "How do you think this poor man fell to his death?" Stapleton asked. "I think cold and hunger, and his fear that the police would catch him, drove him mad. He ran round the moor in his madness and fell over this edge," I said. "Do you agree, Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" asked Stapleton. "You're quick to guess who I am?" said Holmes. "We've been expecting you ever since Dr. Watson arrived." "I have no doubt my friend is right about the way Selden died," said Holmes. "It's a sad death, but it will not prevent me from returning to London tomorrow." "Before you return, will you be able to explain the mysteries that we've experienced here?" "I'm not always as successful as I hope. I need facts, not stories of the supernatural. This hasn't been a good case for me." Stapleton looked hard at him, but Holmes had spoken very seriously, and his words sounded true. We covered the body. Then Stapleton turned to go home, and Holmes and I walked towards Baskerville Hall. "He's a very clever man, and a dangerous enemy who will be difficult to trap," said Holmes. "Look how he controlled his disappointment when he found that the dead man was not Sir Henry." "I'm sorry that he has seen you," I said. "So am I. But there was nothing we could do about it. Now he knows I am here, he may be more careful, or he may act more quickly than he had planned." "Why can't we give him to the police at once?" "Because we can't prove anything against him. Sir Charles was found dead because his heart failed. Again, tonight we could not prove that there was a hound. Selden died from a fall. We have no case at present. We shall see Mrs. Lyons tomorrow, and she may help us. But whatever happens, I have my own plan. There will be some danger, but by the end of tomorrow I hope to have won this battle." He would say nothing else. "Are you coming to the Hall?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "There's no reason for me to hide any longer. But one last word, Watson. Say nothing of the hound to Sir Henry. Let him think that Selden died from a fall. If he knows about the hound, he will find it harder to face the dangers of tomorrow. I think you told me in your last letter that he is having dinner with the Stapletons tomorrow evening." "And they have invited me too," I reminded him. "Then you must excuse yourself, and he must go alone. That can easily be arranged. And now I think we are both ready for some food." Chapter 15. The Trap. When we reached the Hall, Sir Henry was very pleased to see Holmes. But he was surprised that Holmes had no luggage, and that he appeared so unexpectedly. I had the unhappy job of telling Barrymore and his wife about her brother's death. Mrs. Barrymore cried and was very sad indeed. During dinner Sir Henry told us that he had spent a dull day and evening on his own. He had kept his promise to Holmes, and so he had not accepted the Stapletons' invitation to their house that evening. We did not tell him how glad we were that he had stayed away from the moor. Holmes started to say something, and then he stopped suddenly. His eyes were fixed on one of the pictures of the past Baskervilles on the wall. "Sir Henry, could you tell me which Baskerville that is?" he asked. Sir Henry and I both looked at the picture. "That is Sir Hugo, the one who started all the trouble," said Sir Henry. He was the first to see the hound. Holmes looked hard at the picture, but said nothing more. Then, after Sir Henry had gone to his room, Holmes made me stand in front of the picture. "Is it like anyone you know?" he asked. He stood on a chair, and with his hands he covered the hat and hair of the man in the picture. "Good heavens!" I cried in surprise. I was looking at a picture of Stapleton's face. "Yes," said Holmes before I could say anything more. "There's not much doubt about it. Stapleton is a Baskerville. He looks like Sir Hugo, and he has the same evil character. Now I understand why he wants to kill Sir Henry. I am sure we shall find that he will inherit the Baskerville lands. And so we have one more answer. By tomorrow night Stapleton will be caught like one of his butterflies, and we shall add him to the Baker Street collection." We soon went to bed. I was up early in the morning, but Holmes was up earlier. He had already sent one message to the police about Selden, and another to his boy to stop him taking food to the hut. When Sir Henry joined us, Holmes told him that we had to leave for London immediately after breakfast. Sir Henry was very unhappy about this, but Holmes asked him to help us by doing everything Holmes ordered him to do. Sir Henry agreed to help in this way, and to go by himself to the Stapletons that evening. He also agreed to tell the Stapletons that Holmes and I had gone to London, but that we would return to Devonshire soon. "One more order," said Holmes. "I want you to drive to the Stapletons' house, and then send the driver away. Let the Stapletons know that you're going to walk home across the moor." "Across the moor?" said Sir Henry, very surprised. "But you have told me again and again not to do that." "This time it will be completely safe. I know that you are brave enough to do it, and it must be done." "Then I will do it. But you must keep to the path between the Stapletons' house and the Grimpen Road, which is your natural way home. Do not leave the path and the road." I was very surprised by all this. Holmes had told Stapleton that he would return to London, but he had not said that I was going too, and I was very worried that neither of us would be with Sir Henry when he walked across the moor that night. But we had to obey Holmes's orders. Holmes and I left Baskerville Hall immediately after breakfast, and went to the station at Newtown. A small boy was waiting on the platform. "Any orders, sir?" he asked Holmes. "You will take the train to London, my boy. When you get there, you will send a telegram to Sir Henry in my name. It will ask him to send to me at Baker Street the pocket-book I left at the Hall." I began to understand some of Holmes's plan. When Sir Henry received the telegram sent by Holmes's boy, he would think that we had arrived in London. He would tell Stapleton, who would then also believe that we were far away from Baskerville Hall. In fact, we would be very close in case Sir Henry needed us. We left the station and went to see Mrs. Laura Lyons. I introduced Holmes to her. After they had shaken hands, he said, "Dr. Watson has told me everything, Mrs. Lyons. We see Sir Charles's death as a case of murder. Both Stapleton and his wife are suspects." Mrs. Lyons jumped from her chair. "His wife?" she cried. "He has no wife. He is not a married man." "I have come here ready to prove that he is married, and the woman who calls herself his sister is really his wife," said Holmes. He took some photographs and papers from his pocket and showed them to Mrs. Lyons. She looked at the photographs and read the papers. When she put them down, I could see that she had accepted the truth. "I thought this man loved me," she said. but he has lied to me. Ask me what you like, Mr. Holmes, and I will tell you the truth. I never thought any harm would come to Sir Charles. He was a dear old gentleman who was very kind to me. I would do nothing to hurt him." "I believe you, Mrs. Lyons," said Holmes. "Now, let me tell you what I think happened. You can tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong. First of all, I think Stapleton told you to write the letter to Sir Charles and to ask him for help. He also told you to ask Sir Charles to meet you at the Moor Gate. Then, after you had sent the letter, Stapleton persuaded you not to meet Sir Charles after all." "Stapleton told me that he could not allow any other man to give me the money for my divorce," Mrs. Lyons said. "He said he was poor, but that he would give all his money to bring us together. Then, after I heard about Sir Charles's death, Stapleton told me to say nothing about my letter and the meeting. He said I would be a suspect. He frightened me into staying silent." "Yes," said Holmes. "But you wondered about him." She said nothing for a moment and looked down. "Yes," she said. "But since he has lied to me about marrying me, I will no longer keep his secrets." "You are lucky that you have escaped him," Holmes said. "You know too much. But I hope you are safe now. Good morning, Mrs. Lyons, and thank you. You will hear from us soon." "So, one by one our questions are answered," said Holmes as we left Newtown. "When it is over, this will be one of the most famous cases of our time. And now it has nearly ended. We must hope that it ends safely and successfully." Chapter 16. The Hound of the Baskervilles. That evening Holmes and I drove across the moor until we could see the lights of the Stapletons' house in front of us. Then we got out and began to walk very quietly along the path towards the house. When we were very close, Holmes told me to stop. He took his revolver from his pocket, and I did the same. "We shall hide behind these rocks," he whispered. "Watson, you know the house, so I want you to go forward and look through the windows. I want to know where the Stapletons and Sir Henry are and what they are doing. Take great care, because they must not know that somebody is watching them." Very carefully and quietly I moved towards the house. I looked first into the dining-room window. Stapleton and Sir Henry were sitting and smoking their cigars, but there was no sign of Miss Stapleton. I moved round to the other windows, but I could not see her in any of the rooms. I went back to the dining-room window, and as I looked in again, Stapleton left the room and came out of the house. He went to a hut beside the house and unlocked the door. I heard a strange sound coming from the hut, but I could not think what was making the noise. Then Stapleton locked the door and went back into the house and into the dining-room. I went back to Holmes and told him what I had seen. He wanted to know where Miss Stapleton was, and I had to tell him twice that there was no sign of her in the house. The moon was shining on the great Grimpen Marsh, and a fog was rising from it. Holmes watched the fog and began to look worried. The fog was creeping up from the marsh towards the house. We were hidden near the path, which was on the far side of the house from the marsh. "The fog is moving towards us, Watson, and that is very serious," said Holmes. "It's the one thing that could make my plans go wrong." As we watched, the fog, which had crept as far as the house, began to flow round it. Angrily, Holmes hit the rock in front of us with his open hand. "If Sir Henry doesn't come out in the next quarter of an hour, the path will be covered by the fog. In half an hour we shall not be able to see our hands in front of our faces. We must move back to higher ground above the fog." We moved away from the house and out of the fog, which was creeping slowly along the ground and hiding the path from our view. "We must not go too far," said Holmes. "If we do, Sir Henry may be caught before he reaches us." Holmes went down on one knee and put his ear to the ground. "Thank heaven! I think I hear him coming." Then we heard quick footsteps on the path. After a few moments, Sir Henry appeared out of the fog and walked on in the clear moonlight. He came quickly along the path, passed close to where we were hidden, and began to walk up the hill behind us. As he walked, he looked over his shoulder again and again, like a man who is worried that something is following him. "Listen," said Holmes sharply. "Look out! It's coming!" I heard him make his revolver ready to fire, and I did the same. There was a sound of quick, light footsteps from inside the curtain of fog. The thick cloud had crept to within 50 meters of where we were hidden. We tried to see into it, and wondered what horrible thing would appear. I looked at Holmes. His eyes were fixed on the place where the path disappeared into the fog. He was pale, but his eyes were bright. He looked like a man who was going to win the most important game of his life. Then suddenly his eyes nearly jumped out of his head, and his mouth opened in frightened surprise. I looked away from him to see what his eyes were fixed on. When I saw the awful shape that was coming towards us out of the fog, my blood turned cold. The revolver nearly fell from my hands, and my whole body froze with fear. I saw a hound, an enormous black hound. It was bigger than any dog I had ever seen. But it was something else that filled us with terror. No human eye had ever seen a hound like this one. Fire came from its open mouth. Its eyes were burning. Flames covered its head and body. It was a more horrible sight than anyone could imagine. A hell-hound sent by the devil. It was not a creature of the natural world. The huge, black, burning hound ran quickly and silently after Sir Henry. Far away along the path we saw him turn and look back at the hound. His face was white in the moonlight, and his hands were lifted in horror. He watched helplessly as the terrible creature got closer to him. We were so frozen by the ghostly and unnatural sight that we let the hound go past us, and we could not move. Our friend was near to death, and we were helpless with fear. Chapter 17. The Search for the Murderer. Then our fear for Sir Henry became greater than our terror. Holmes and I fired our revolvers together. The creature gave a loud cry of pain, and we knew we had hit it. But it did not stop, and ran on after Sir Henry. When we heard the cry of pain, our fears disappeared. This was no supernatural hound. Our bullets could hurt it, and we could kill it. We ran after it as fast as we could. I have never seen anyone run as quickly as Holmes ran that night, and I could not keep up with him. In front of us on the path we heard scream after scream from Sir Henry, and the deep voice of the hound. I saw the creature jump at Sir Henry and throw him to the ground. Its teeth went for his throat. But the next moment Holmes had emptied his revolver into the hound's body. It gave a last deep cry. Its teeth closed on the empty air, and it fell to the ground. I put my revolver to its head, but I did not need to fire. The hound was dead. Sir Henry lay unconscious where he had fallen. Quickly we opened the neck of his shirt. Holmes had fired just in time, and the hound's teeth had not reached our friend's throat. Already his eyes were beginning to open, and he looked up at us.
"My God," he whispered. "What was it? What in heaven's name was it?"
"It's dead, whatever it was," said Holmes. "We've killed the family ghost forever." The creature that lay before us was as large as a small lion. Its mouth and teeth were huge. They shone with blue flames. There were rings of blue fire round its cruel eyes, too. I touched the hound's burning coat. When I held up my hand, it too seemed to be on fire. "Phosphorus," I said. "That is why the hound appears to burn in the dark. Stapleton put phosphorus paint on the hound in the hut beside the house." But Holmes was thinking more about Sir Henry than about Stapleton's cleverness. "I must apologize to you, Sir Henry," he said. "I put your life in danger. I expected to see a huge hound, but not a creature like this. The fog gave us a very short time to control our fear, and for moments we could not move."
"Never mind," said Sir Henry. "You saved my life, and I thank you. Please, help me stand up. What are you going to do now?"
Sir Henry's legs were shaking so much from his terrible experience that he could not stand. We helped him to a rock. He sat there and held his head in his hands. "We must leave you here, Sir Henry, and try to catch Stapleton. We shall come back as quickly as possible and take you to the Hall. Our case is complete, but we must now catch our man." I followed Holmes along the path back to the house. "We must search the house," said Holmes, "but almost certainly he won't be there. He probably heard the noise of our guns, so he knows his evil game is finished." The front door of the house was open. We went in and looked from room to room. All the rooms downstairs were empty, so we went upstairs and looked in all the rooms except one, which was locked. "There's someone in there," I said. "I heard someone move. Help me break open this door." We threw ourselves against the door, and as the lock broke, we went in. We held our revolvers ready to fire. In the middle of the room was a figure tied to a post. We could not see whether it was a man or a woman, as it was completely covered with sheets. Only the eyes and nose were free. We pulled off the sheets and untied the prisoner from the post. It was Miss Stapleton. As we untied her, we could see long red bruises across her neck. "That cruel devil Stapleton has beaten her," Holmes said. "Put her into a chair." Miss Stapleton had fainted from the beating and exhaustion. As we put her into the chair, she opened her eyes. "Is he safe?" she asked. "Has he escaped?" "He cannot escape us, Miss Stapleton," Holmes said. No, I don't mean my husband. I mean Sir Henry. Is he safe?" "Yes," I said, "and the hound is dead." "Thank God," she said. "Thank God. Oh, the cruel devil! Look what he has done to me." She showed us her arms, and we saw with horror that her skin was black and blue where she had been beaten. "But he has hurt me more in other ways. While I thought he loved me, I accepted many things. But he doesn't love me. He has used me." "Then help us now," said Holmes. "Tell us where he is gone." "There is an old house on an island in the middle of the marsh," she said. "He kept his hound there. He also had the house ready in case he needed to escape. He will be there, I'm sure." Nobody could find his way into the Grimpen Marsh in this fog tonight," said Holmes, looking out of the window. The fog lay like white wool against the glass, and we knew we could not try to follow him until it cleared. We decided to take Sir Henry back to Baskerville Hall. We had to tell him everything about the Stapletons, and he was deeply hurt when he heard the truth about the woman he loved. The news that she was married, and the awful fear he had experienced, brought on a fever. We sent for Dr. Mortimer, who came and sat with Sir Henry throughout the night. On the following morning, Miss Stapleton took us to the path through the marsh. The fog had lifted, and she showed us the sticks which she and her husband had put in to mark the way. We followed them through the marsh, which smelled of dying plants. The wet ground pulled at our feet as we walked. From time to time, one of us stepped from the path and sank up to his waist in the marsh. One man on his own could not hope to escape the pull of the marsh. Without help, he would sink to his death. But we did not find any sign of Stapleton. We searched and searched without success. There is no doubt that he lost his way in the fog and sank in the marsh. Somewhere deep down, his body lies to this day. We reached the island Miss Stapleton had described and searched the old house.
"This place tells us nothing that we do not already know," said Holmes.
"These bones show that he hid the hound here, but he could not keep it quiet, so people heard its cries. Here is the bottle of phosphorus paint. Stapleton used it very cleverly on the hound. After what we saw and felt last night, we cannot be surprised that Sir Charles died of fright. And now I understand how Selden knew that the hound was following him in the dark. It's not surprising the poor man screamed and ran as he did. The old story of the supernatural hound probably gave Stapleton the idea of using phosphorus. Very clever. I said it in London, and I say it again, Watson. We have never had a more dangerous enemy than the one who is lying out there." And he pointed to the great marsh that was all round us. Chapter 18. Looking Back. It was the end of November, more than a month after our return from Baskerville Hall. Holmes and I were sitting on either side of a bright fire in our sitting-room in Baker Street. Since our return, Holmes had been working hard on 2 other cases, and he had been too busy to discuss the Baskerville case. But now the other cases were finished, and he had been successful in both of them. I decided it was a good time to ask him the final questions about Stapleton and the hound. "The picture showed us that Stapleton was indeed a Baskerville," Holmes began. "He was the son of Roger Baskerville, who was Sir Charles's younger brother. Roger was a criminal who escaped from prison and ran away to South America. Everyone thought he had died unmarried, but that was not true. He had one son, also called Roger, whom we knew as Stapleton. Stapleton married a beautiful South American, and came to England, where he started a school in the north. He discovered that he would inherit the Baskerville lands and fortune if Sir Charles and Sir Henry both died. That is why he moved to Devonshire when the school closed. When he met Sir Charles, he heard the story of the hellhound. He also learned that Sir Charles believed these supernatural stories, and that he had a weak heart. Stapleton had the idea of buying a huge hound, and of using the phosphorus to make it shine like the hound in the story. I have found the place where he bought the animal. He took it by train to Devonshire, and walked many miles over the moors with it, so that it would not be seen near Baskerville Hall. He needed to get Sir Charles out of the hall at night. This would be easy to do if his wife made Sir Charles fall in love with her, but although he beat her, she refused to help him with his evil plan. Then Stapleton met Laura Lyons. We know that he made her write a letter to bring Sir Charles to the moor gate on that sad night. The hound, which was shining with phosphorus, chased Sir Charles down the yew alley. Sir Charles's terror was so great that his weak heart stopped and he died. But the animal did not touch the dead body. The hound had run on the grass, so it left no footprints, except the one found by Dr. Mortimer. You see how clever Stapleton was. Neither he nor the hound had touched Sir Charles, so there was no sign of murder. The only two people who might suspect him, his wife and Mrs. Lyons, could not be certain about what he had done. Anyway, neither of them would inform the police about him. Next, Stapleton learned that Sir Henry had reached England, so he went to London. He hoped to murder Sir Henry there. He took his wife with him, but he wasn't sure that she would keep his secret, so he did not tell her the truth. He locked her up in their hotel. She knew that he had some evil plan, but she was too frightened to give Sir Henry a clear warning. Instead, she sent him the letter made of words cut from a newspaper. Meanwhile, Stapleton was wearing a false beard and following Sir Henry. He needed something to give the hound Sir Henry's scent, so he paid a maid at Sir Henry's hotel to steal one of his shoes. The first one was a new one, and didn't have Sir Henry's scent on it. It was no use for the hound, so he put it back, and another, older shoe was stolen. When the shoes were changed, I knew that the hound must be a natural and not a supernatural creature. Next, there was the letter made of words cut from a newspaper. When I looked at it, I held it close to my eyes. I noticed a smell of perfume, so I guessed that a woman had sent the letter. By the time I went to Devonshire, I knew that there was a real hound, and I knew we were looking for a man and a woman. I guessed that the Stapletons were the pair. I had to watch Stapleton, but I had to hide myself. As I have explained, I could not tell you what I was doing. I stayed in Newtown and used the hut on the moor only when necessary. Your letters were sent to me immediately from Baker Street and were very helpful. When you told me that Stapleton had owned a school in the north of England, I checked on him and where he had come from. I discovered he had come from South America, and then everything became clear. By the time you found me on the moor, I knew everything, but I could prove nothing. We had to catch the man doing something criminal, and so I had to put Sir Henry in danger. Dr. Mortimer tells me that Sir Henry will be completely better after some rest. As you know, the two of them have become good friends, and are going on a long holiday together. Sir Henry will take some time to forget Miss Stapleton. He loved her deeply, and it hurt him badly when he learned the truth about her. She was very frightened of her cruel husband, but she suspected that he was responsible for Sir Charles's death. She knew about the hound, and when Selden died she guessed that the hound had killed him. She knew her husband had the hound at their house on the night Sir Henry came to dinner. They argued about the hound that evening, and as they argued, Stapleton told her about Mrs. Lyons. Any love she had for her husband disappeared at that moment. He knew that she wanted to help Sir Henry, so he beat her and tied her up. He probably hoped that when he inherited the Baskerville lands, she would love him again. He certainly thought that she would keep silent if she became Lady Baskerville. But I think he was wrong. He had been too cruel to her. She could not forgive him or love him again, nor, I think, allow him to enjoy the results of his crime. Of course, he could not frighten Sir Henry in the same way as Sir Charles. Sir Henry was a young and healthy man, so he kept the hound hungry. He knew that the animal would either kill Sir Henry, or would hurt him so badly that it would be easy to complete the murder. I had one last question for Holmes. But Stapleton was living so close to Baskerville Hall, and using a false name. It looked very strange. How would he explain that to the police, if after Sir Henry's death he then inherited the Baskerville lands and fortune? I don't know how he planned to explain the false name, and why he was living at Penn House, said Holmes. I can only say that he was a very clever man. I am sure he had thought of an answer to the problem. But that's enough work for the evening, Watson. I have 2 tickets for the theatre. If we get ready now, we shall have time to stop at my favourite restaurant for some dinner on the way.